ever gotten to the end of your week or maybe the end of the month and thought, man, I've been working so hard, so why isn't my bank account reflecting this? It's not that you're not working hard, it's that you may be spending your time not aligned to where the revenue is actually coming from now and in the future. And having been in business for myself for almost 20 years now, I've spent a lot of time thinking about practicing, making mistakes with, and relearning how to spend time in my business. So that's what I want to share right now is some new ways of thinking about where your time is going so that you can be putting yourself in the best position to be growing in the way that feels aligned and sustainable for your business. So here's the thing, not all hours in your business are created equal. It's kind of like when with nutrition, not all calories are created equal. It's the same with time in the business. It's not all of them are created equal. You're actually spending your time across 3 time zones. So I'm going to talk about these 3 time zones that as a way to look at how your time is being allocated. So the first time zone is the income time zone. Of course, this is your billable time. This is the stuff that you get invoiced for. This is your deliverables, your client sessions, client calls, everything like that. This is probably the most visible form of your productivity. Next, we have the expenses time zone. Now, this is the admin side of your business. This is inbox stuff, dealing with tech, managing people, etc. This is the stuff that is like the cost of doing business, right? So that's why I call it the expenses. It's a necessary expense. So a lot of it is like the behind the scenes stuff that makes your business run, right? It's necessary, but it's not directly tied to generating revenue. And then the third time zone is the investment time zone. Now, this is the stuff like strategy, visioning, writing for the purposes of thought leadership and developing your unique perspective, relationship building, networking. This is CEO time. This is CEO time, even having sales calls and, just moving things along from the sales side. So that's the investment side of the business. Okay, so let's go into each one of these because I want to talk about, as I like to often, the behaviors or the beliefs, I should say, that are driving the behaviors that you may be engaging in around these different concepts. So in other words, what's going on that is creating a situation where you may be spending more time in one or other of these time zones? Okay. So let's go back to the income time zone. Now, this is where this feels safe for a lot of people. You know the drill. You know how to deliver for your clients. You know what to do. And it's pretty cut and dry and it feels good, right? Because you're making money that right then and there. So that is like a very safe place for a lot of people. But if you have all of your time allocated to client delivery, then of course that doesn't leave enough time for the other things, which would be shifting your business model, raising your rates, doing more strategy and visioning work that's going to move you into the next level of your business, that CEO time or the investment time. Now, on the expenses side, this is also another place where people can find themselves spending a lot of time because that's when you're like overwhelmed with all the things doing in your business. It can sometimes feel good to kind of hang out here on the expenses side, just do the admin work. It could be because you don't have enough support. So you're doing a lot of this yourself on the expenses side. It feels good. It feels like you're making progress because it's oftentimes like the little tangible kind of stuff that's been on the to-do list that's easy to check off, right? Like update, a page on your website or tinker with your LinkedIn profile, update your books or just all of the, like there's an endless list, right? And so it can feel really good to check some of those things off the list. But it's sneaky because sometimes we spend too much time in the expenses time zone because we're procrastinating. Because we're like, I don't know what else I should be doing. And again, it feels like it can be more tangible type work. And it also feels like I'm in control. I'm getting stuff done in the business. Okay, but when the business feels uncertain, that spending time in the expenses time zone is a false sense of stability. Okay. And so you can be lured into thinking like, this is where I need to be spending my time. All right. So then let's talk about that third time zone, the investment time zone, where your future revenue lies. Okay. Here's why there's often not enough time spent in the investment time zone. It's because it's the important, not urgent stuff. And so without that sense of urgency, without a deadline attached to it, it's so easy to just put it off, right? We just don't allocate the time for it because we're already so busy with the other things in the business. Nobody's asking for it. Nobody's waiting on it, right? So there's no, again, back to that sense of urgency. There's no sense of urgency. But the investment time is the key. You have to make time for the investment. You have to spend some time in the investment time zone because that's where your growth is happening. Not only a growth as you as a person inside your business, but as you being the leader of your business, elevating the entirety of the business. That's what's happening in the investment time zone. And if you don't make time to invest in what's next, you're just going to be stuck in what's now. Okay, so I'm going to say that again. If you don't make time to invest in what's next, you're going to stay stuck in what's now. You're just going to be in status quo. Okay, so here's the deal. Most service providers are overspending in the expense time zone, right? As I was just saying, it's a trap. It's a lure. Yes, of course, you need to be spending some time there for sure, but not too much time there. And that's also the time zone where it's easiest to get some outside help, to bring in some support. We also can see a situation where you're spending too much time in the income time zone. It feels really good if you've got a very full schedule of client work. I mean, that's awesome, right? That feels like the goal. And yet you can get so overwhelmed in the income time zone that you don't have anything left for things like marketing and networking and relationship building and all the stuff and everything, right? That everything that happens in the investment time zone. And that leads to a common situation, which is the hurchy-lurchy. When you have hurchy-lurchy marketing happening, you have hurchy-lurchy income and hurchy-lurchy cash flow issues and all the things that are a result of getting too bogged down in client to delivery in the income time zone and not enough in the investment time zone. And you can lead to burnout, right? If you're over delivering from the perspective of just too much time allocation, not necessarily over delivering per client, but just too much time allocation as a whole in client delivery, that's where burnout can really happen, right? Because a lot of that rejuvenation happens in the investment time zone. You know, CEOs, if you're going to be a CEO, peaceful, calm, sustainable CEO of your business, you're going to need to invest in self-care, right? Self-care is going to be critical. It is critical. So you might be wondering at this point, well, what's the ideal ratio for time allocation across these three time zones? And that is going to be dependent upon your business model, the stage where you're at in your business. But I want to give you a little bit of guidelines around that, or just at least a baseline to kind of think about. Now, I'm going to base this on the fact that you may be working full time, or in my example, I'm going to say you're working full time. Okay. So we're working with a 40-hour work week. And I would recommend, just again as a baseline, this is the ideal scenario, is that you've got 50% of the 40 hours going toward the income. All right. So 50% of your time, that's going to keep your cash flow going. And that's a good thing, right? We got to be invoicing and getting that billable time in for sure. And then your investment time, so the revenue in the future, spending about 30%. So that's going to be about 12 hours out of your week. Okay. So right now we've identified that 50 hours a week for income, 12 hours a week for investment, and then the rest of your time, 8 hours or so, for the expense side. Now, of course, as I mentioned, this will be dependent upon your business model and where you're at in your business and all of that kind of stuff. So here's the deal. If you're new in your business or newer in your business, then you may need to put more into the investment side of things. You may need to be doing more work on your messaging, your assets, your outreach, your just developing your positioning and your perspective, and really honing in on a strategy and all that kind of stuff, right? If you're new in your business and you just simply not be in a position where you've got a lot of income. A lot of income, or I should say, you don't need to be spending a lot of time in the income time zone just because you don't have enough clients yet. And that's fine. What you don't want to do is shift all of that available time that you have into the expenses side. I see this happen all the time. People are spending way too much in the expenses and not enough on that investment side. Okay. So that's if you're newer in your business. Now, let's say you're fully booked out, like you've got a full client roster, everything is looking good from that standpoint, but you feel like you're just kind of stalled from a growth standpoint, whether that's growth as you define it by revenue or number of people you're working with, or even the type of people that you're working with. Like maybe you want to shift to working with a new type of person, new group of people, shift your model, like all that kind of stuff. Okay. Then what's happening is you're probably spending too much time. Well, you're already spending, like, you're capped at your amount of income time, and you may also be spending too much in the expenses time zone. So you will need to look at shifting some hours out of the income or the expenses into the investment. Okay, so you're going to have to either say no to things or delegate. Okay, so that could look like bringing on subcontractors or an employee. It could be meaning like hiring some more VAs or something like that to help so that you can free up the time you need to put into investment. If you're in a launch or growth period, like that's a very intentional move you've already made, then you may be temporarily adjusting down your income, the amount of time you're spending in the income time zone, and up leveling the amount of time that you're spending in investment, so that because you're in that growth period, right? And so a lot of that growth period is happening in the investment time zone. Okay, so that ratio for you might look something like 40% income, 40% investment, and then the rest in the expense. But that necessarily is not going to be how it will be for the long term. It just might be for a shorter period of time. So this reminds me of the hidden time zones in your business, which I'll put a link to that as well, because this is all tied to one of the 3 hidden time zones, which is the build timeline in your business. So just if you happen to be in a growth period or launching, then you need to be aware of the business timeline in your business. Okay, so here's the reason why I'm talking about this so much, is because if you want to move into a future state of your business, if you are like, maybe everything's pretty good in your business, but you know there could be more, or you really want more for yourself and your business. Again, everybody finds more in a little bit different way. Then you really need to understand where your time is being allocated right now, and what that ratio looks like, and do you need to be shifting that ratio? So I do have a resource for you, and if you want to be able to have more clarity about how you're shifting or how you're spending your time, how that relates to your hourly rate. Again, even if you're not billing by an hourly rate, you've got one, how that relates to your hourly rate and where you need to take things. And it's more than just a time audit. It's really a future revenue planner in your business. If you want this, just either drop a little growth emoji, a little plant emoji in the DMs, or email me and just say future revenue plan. And if you want further help for all of this, then definitely go ahead and book a clarity call with me, and we can talk about where you're at right now in your business, where you want to take things, and how I can support you with that. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next video.